Everyone thinks the nightmare ended when Finney walked out of that basement, but what if killing the grabber was only the beginning? What if his death set a much darker spirit free? Today, we are heading to the frozen remains of Camp Alpine Lake to uncover a secret that has been buried in the ice since 1957. From psychic dreams to a phone that rings from the afterlife, this is the story of how Finney and Gwen had to face the grabber one last time. Let's dive into the mystery. In 1957, at the desolate Camp Alpine Lake in Colorado, a girl named Hope stands at a payphone, dialing a number she found carved into the ice during a haunting dream. But instead of a voice, all she hears is a soul-piercing static that eventually turns into a high-pitched shriek, forcing her to hang up in terror. Fast forward to Denver in 1982, where the trauma of the past has changed everything. Finney, once a victim, is now the aggressor, relentlessly beating a new kid until his sister Gwen intervenes. It has been 4 years since Finney defeated the serial killer known as the Grabber, and while he's earned a reputation for being tough, the victory has left him cold and hardened. Later that day, they are approached by Ernie, whose brother was one of the Grabber's victims. He invites Gwen to a concert, and though she agrees, the mood remains heavy. That night, Finney is unable to sleep, haunted by the memory of the man who nearly took his life. As he smokes outside, he hallucinates the Grabber standing in his own backyard, a ghost that refuses to stay in the past. Gwen tries to comfort him, but Finney shuts her out completely. Back in the vision of Alpine Lake, a boy named Felix is running through the woods, desperately trying to escape a pursuer. He trips, and the Grabber is there in an instant, brutally ending his life. As his body is cast into the frozen lake, Felix manages to scratch the letter W into the ice with his dying breath. Gwen bolts upright. It was another one of her psychic dreams. She finds herself at the front door, sleepwalking once again, convinced she saw something lurking across the street. Finney dismisses her fears as mere nightmares and sends her back to bed. The following day, Gwen's search for supernatural answers makes her a target for bullies at school, who mock her as a witch. Only Ernie stands by her, sharing his own connection to the mystical through his grandmother's tarot cards. Ernie is well aware that Gwen's dreams were the key to finding the Grabber's victims, and although the topic makes Gwen uneasy, Ernie assures her that he likes weird. Later, while at a local store, Finney hears a payphone ringing. He answers it with a cold, "Sorry, I can't help you," before hanging up, only for it to be revealed that the phone is actually out of order. Back at the haunting Camp Alpine Lake, a boy named Cal is enjoying the summer activities, but his joy is short-lived. One night, the Grabber chases him through the forest, captures him, and brutally dismembers him with an axe. Cal's spirit manages to scratch the letter B into the ice right next to the W. Once again, Gwen is jolted awake by a ringing phone, but this time the nightmare has followed her into reality. She is horrified to find Cal's lifeless body lying in her own yard. Driven by desperation, she bikes to the Grabber's old house and sneaks into the cellar. The infamous black phone is still there. When she picks it up, she hears Hope's voice from 1957, realizing that Hope was having these same visions decades ago, only she was finding numbers instead of letters. Before she can learn more, the line dissolves into static. Gwen turns to find the ghost of the Grabber's brother standing behind her, warning her that she shouldn't be there. Suddenly, the cellar door creaks open, and the phone begins to ring. Someone descends the stairs, but it is only Finney, who has come looking for his sister. Gwen frantically explains that she was just speaking to Hope, and the revelation is staggering. Hope, the girl from the 1957 visions, was actually their mother in her youth. Finney, ever the skeptic, dismisses it as a hallucination and spits on the ground as they exit. The following day, Gwen discovers a pamphlet for Camp Alpine Lake and suggests they apply as counselors to investigate the murders, but Finney refuses to return to the trauma. However, their father, Terrence, overhears the conversation. His face pales as he recognizes the camp as the exact place where his wife once worked. He reveals that it was shut down in 1958 and admits his deep-seated dislike for Christian camps. Despite the warnings, Gwen eventually convinces Ernie to go to the site with her, and Finney reluctantly joins them to protect his sister. Their journey turns into a nightmare as they drive into a blinding snowstorm. With the road disappearing beneath the whiteout, Finney is forced to run ahead of the car to guide Ernie through the storm until they are spotted by a man named Mustang, who leads them to the camp with a flashlight. There, they meet the manager, Armando, who warns them that no children will be arriving until the weather clears. The trio is left alone in the freezing, empty dorms. As soon as Gwen falls asleep, the visions return. She sees a boy named Spike, a member of the camp band, being murdered. His ghost adds the letter H to the sequence in the ice just before his face splits in half. She wakes to a terrifying scraping sound coming from under the neighboring bed. Outside, Finney's own haunting continues. The camp's payphone begins to ring incessantly. Every time he walks away, the ringing pulls him back. When he finally answers with his cold, usual dismissiveness, the voice on the other end changes. Through the static, the grabber's voice whispers, "Hello, Finney." Suddenly, the phone booth door jams shut, trapping Finney inside. The grabber's voice tells him that hell isn't made of flames, but of ice, because nothing burns like the cold. Back in the bedroom, Gwen's nightmare becomes a physical reality as she finds the mangled body of Felix under the bed. Cal's ghost reaches out and leaves a literal burn mark on her arm, while the spirit of Spike approaches the window. Someone lurking in the shadows shatters the glass, causing it to fall and slice Spike's face apart just as he did in the vision. Gwen's screams echo through the camp, and at that exact moment, the phone booth door finally gives way, allowing Finney to rush to her side. Gwen suffers a total breakdown, convinced she is losing her mind, while Finney does his best to comfort her and tend to the burn mark on her arm. Terrified of being alone, Gwen joins Ernie in his bed. Unable to sleep, she whispers a prayer for protection. Ernie overhears her, and the two begin to talk about their faith, bonding over the shared experience of growing up in deeply devout families. Gwen confides in Ernie, admitting she fears her mother's psychic dreams drove her to madness, and that the same fate awaits her. Ernie comforts her, and for a moment, the tension between them almost leads to a kiss, but Finney intervenes and forces them to go to sleep. The next morning, a rift forms between the siblings. Finney is furious that Gwen shared their secrets with Ernie, but Gwen fires back, showing him the literal burn mark on her arm as proof that these visions are no longer just in her head. At breakfast, the atmosphere remains tense. Armando scolds Gwen for staying in the boys' dorm and questions their true motives for being at the camp. However, when they show him a photograph of Hope, his demeanor softens. He recognizes her immediately as a former counselor and is visibly shaken to learn she took her own life 7 years prior. He instructs the trio to call their families from the office to confirm their safety, but when Finney mentions the payphone outside, Armando reveals a chilling fact. That phone hasn't been operational in over a decade. No sooner has Armando left than the payphone begins to chime across the snowy yard. Finney rushes to it, hearing a boy's voice through the static, weeping about the cold and warning them they shouldn't be there. The three ghosts appear, surrounding the booth in a desperate plea for help, but they vanish the moment Finney hangs up. Miles away, their father Terrence receives Gwen's call, but his intuition tells him something is wrong. Haunted by the blizzard, he calls a friend to borrow a snowplow, determined to reach them. Back at the camp, Gwen and Ernie try to dig into the site's history with staff members Kenneth and Barbara. While Kenneth is polite, Barbara is openly hostile, judging Gwen for her behavior and refusing to discuss the horrible matters of the murdered boys. The argument grows so heated that Kenneth eventually asks the teenagers to leave. That night, the veil between worlds thins even further. Gwen dreams of her mother answering the phone and talking to the dead boys. In the vision, red feathers fall from the sky like snow, and blood begins to ooze from a tree trunk struck by an axe. She wakes to the sound of the dorm door slamming and catches a fleeting glimpse of her mother's spirit staring back at her. Drawn into the night, Gwen begins to follow the ghost of Felix through the snow. Simultaneously, the payphone wakes Finney once more. He tells Ernie to watch over Gwen while he answers the call. On the line, the grabber's voice returns with a terrifying message. He has returned to destroy everything Finney loves as revenge for the night. Finney forced him to kill his own brother. Terror ripples through the camp as Ernie finds Gwen's bed empty and runs to alert the staff. Meanwhile, Felix leads Gwen into the mess hall, drawing her toward the kitchen. As she enters, the industrial ovens roar open, belching massive, unnatural flames into the room. Heavy objects crash to the floor, the clamor echoing through the building and alerting the adults to exactly where Gwen is hiding. Suddenly, the grabber's ghost lunges from the shadows, swinging an axe at Gwen. She fights desperately to defend herself, but the phantom remains invisible to the physical world. He lashes a belt around her legs to bring her down, and when she manages to block his next strike, he begins to choke her. Ernie and the adults burst into the kitchen, witnessing the horrific sight of Gwen struggling to breathe as if by an unseen hand. Suddenly, her body is hurled against the wall. The chaos escalates as Gwen is thrown onto a table and spun violently through the air toward the roaring ovens. Ernie lunges forward, grabbing her legs to anchor her. But as the adults move to assist, objects fly off the shelves like projectiles, driving them back. Mustang dodges the debris to help Ernie pull Gwen to safety just as Finney arrives. At the sight of the boy who defeated him, the grabber retreats into the darkness. Once the terror subsides, the group gathers in the chapel. Gwen describes the boys from her visions, and a somber Armando admits he never stopped looking for them. He reveals a photograph from the camp's final year in 1958. Among the staff stands their mother, Hope, and right beside her is a face Finney knows all too well, the grabber. Armando identifies him as the former maintenance man, nicknamed Wild Bill Hickok, because he always wore a gunslinger's belt. Gwen realizes the initials WBH perfectly match the letters the spirits scratched into the ice. This camp was the birthplace of his madness. Finney points out a chilling connection. The strange occurrences at the camp began 4 years ago, the exact moment he killed the grabber in Denver. By destroying his body, he unintentionally set the killer's spirit free to return to his original hunting grounds. Gwen theorizes that the grabber is feeding on the restless fear of his victims' souls. To stop him, they must find the bodies. Armando recalls that Bill had ice fishing equipment, meaning he could have easily disposed of the boys beneath the frozen surface of the lake. That night, as Armando returns to his office, the atmosphere turns frigid. He spots a snowman outside that wasn't there before, and his radio crackles to life with the grabber's distorted voice. "You made me kill my brother." Armando stands his ground, calling the spirit Bill and vowing to find the boys. The grabber erupts in fury, screaming that Bill is no longer his name, and slams against the window, leaving behind a terrifying mask formed from blood and snow before vanishing. The next morning, the group scours the lake, but their search yields nothing but ice and silence. As evening falls, Finney and Ernie promise to watch over Gwen, hoping her psychic gifts will provide one last clue. In her sleep, Gwen drifts into a vision of a paperboy named Billy. She watches as the grabber's black van pulls up to kidnap him, the killer's very first victim in Denver. In the vision, she sees her mother, Hope, witnessing this same event through her own dreams and recognizing the kidnapper as Wild Bill from the camp years before. In the real world, Gwen begins to sleepwalk, her mind lost in the bridge between the past and the present, until Ernie gently guides her back to bed. The dream spirals into a horrific revelation as Gwen watches her mother, Hope, leave her bed and travel to the grabber's house. In this vision of the past, Hope discovers a child in the cellar and attempts to flee, but the young grabber captures her. The ghost grabber then forces Gwen into his van, claiming it is a kindness to show her the truth. The van stops at Gwen's childhood home, where she is forced to witness the devastating sight of her mother hanging in the garage. It is revealed that Hope did not take her own life. The grabber murdered her and staged the scene. Gwen watches in agony as a younger Terrence discovers the body. When the grabber draws his axe, Gwen flees, running through her house only to find herself trapped back in the grabber's cellar. The black phone rings, and Felix's voice urges her to hide. She discovers a hidden hole in the wall leading to a locked door. As she pounds on it, the grabber slashes her arm with his axe, a wound that physically manifests on her arm in the real world. Ernie and the others watch in terror as Gwen bleeds, unable to wake her from the trance. Gwen finally bursts through the door and finds Felix, who helps her escape toward the lake. In the waking world, Armando is frantically breaking the ice where he has located Felix's remains. Suddenly, a payphone appears on the frozen lake in Gwen's dream. She answers it to hear the grabber vowing to defend his power. The spirit then appears behind Armando and begins shattering the ice beneath him. Gwen is trapped in the booth, forced to watch as Armando plunges into the freezing depths. When he tries to climb out, the grabber's phantom foot shoves him back under. In her desperation to escape the booth, Gwen's dream punches hit Finney in reality. The grabber then shatters the booth's glass and begins choking Gwen with the phone cord, spinning her body like a top. In the dorm room, Gwen's physical body levitates and spins violently, spraying blood across the walls. Mustang throws cold water on her to break the spell, but it fails. Only when Gwen hears her friends' voices through the phone does she find her own strength. She causes the booth to explode in her dream, headbutts the grabber, and finally wakes up. The group rushes to the lake just in time to pull a freezing Armando from the water. He confirms he has found Felix, but the other boys remain lost. Their rescue is interrupted by the arrival of Terrence in a snowplow. While Finney is ready to flee, Gwen stands her ground. She confronts both her father and brother for burying their trauma and reveals the truth about Hope's murder. The revelation shatters Terrence's denial, and he agrees to stay. The next day is spent in a fruitless search, until Gwen suddenly falls back into a forced sleep. The grabber appears, skating mockingly across the lake. As Gwen falls into a hole in her dream, her real body becomes inexplicably soaked. The spirit's violence escalates as he strikes Kenneth with an axe and drags him across the ice. In the physical world, Kenneth is yanked by an invisible force, colliding with Barbara and sending her crashing face first into the frozen surface. The grabber is no longer just a memory. He is a physical storm of vengeance. As the grabber continues his brutal assault on Barbara and Kenneth, Gwen's vision shifts beneath the surface. Underwater, she spots several heavy barrels. She kicks them with all her strength, finally revealing the resting place of the last two missing boys. In the chaos, the ice begins to shatter, and the rescue cable plunges into the freezing water. The grabber's spirit makes one final desperate move, leaping at Finney and wrapping his heavy belt around the boy's neck to choke him. Seeing the opening, Terrence dives into the water to help Gwen haul the barrels to the surface, while Finney gathers his strength and shoves the phantom away. Gwen begins to pray with everything she has, and her words act as a beacon, finally breaking the grabber's hold and setting the boys' souls free. Inside the dream world, the bodies of the victims rise from the depths of the ice. They trip the grabber, their skeletal hands clamping around his ankles. The three spirits stand as a wall, blocking his escape, while Gwen strikes him with the axe and rips the mask from his face. The grabber is left vulnerable and terrified until Finney appears behind him, repeatedly smashing the killer's head against the frozen lake. Gwen delivers the final blow, chopping the grabber's leg free from the ice, and together, the siblings cast his body into the dark water. The three boys push him down into the abyss, ensuring the grabber dies for good. Gwen wakes up in the real world, the nightmare finally over, and shares a long-awaited kiss with Ernie. Later, a somber but relieved Armando calls the families of the victims to deliver the news they've waited decades to hear. Their children have finally been found. As the group prepares to leave, Gwen hears the payphone ring one last time. When she answers, it isn't a monster on the other end, but the voice of her mother. Hope congratulates her for saving the boys and reassures her that their psychic gift isn't a curse, but a light. She tells her children she loves them before the line goes quiet. Gwen shares the message with Finney, and the siblings finally leave the camp behind, heading home with their father to start a new life, free from the shadows of the past. If you enjoyed this video, do the algorithm things. Like, sub, and maybe check out the channel. It keeps the lights on and the mic warm.